All right, welcome everyone. We're so excited that you're all here. It's been so fun to see everyone in the chat. Thank you for everybody chiming in where you're watching from. Thank you to everyone who is around the world watching in the middle of the night. We love that you are so excited and staying up late. If you haven't chatted to say where you're from, we would love to hear from you. Tell us where you're at. Tell us what you're doing, why you're here. We're thrilled that you're excited. Your books, if you've ordered them from Charis, are on their way. Hopefully will be in your mailbox tomorrow. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle, and Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books. Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. I should say the U.S. American South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're a queer-owned bookstore. We've been around since 1974. I want to make sure to wish everyone a happy Pride because we're still at the tail end of Pride Month. And even though it's been an unconventional Pride Month, it's been a really special Pride Month for us because we really feel that the spirit of Pride is alive and well in ways that in the United States, people have been rebelling against police brutality and against other kinds of oppression. And so we feel really that even though there weren't as many parades or things like that, that the spirit of Pride is more alive than it's been in decades. So tonight, it's a real honor to have Clark Moore here with us. Clark, I'm sure, is familiar to you all from Love, Simon. And so you're going to get to talk with Clark and ask questions about his acting career and anything else you want to ask Clark. But Clark is here to interview the star of the night, Becky Albertalli. Becky, as you know, is the author of many, many books, and most recently, Love, Creekwood, which officially drops tomorrow. So what we're going to invite you to do is at the bottom of your screen, there's an Ask a Question button. You can click on that and ask your question. You can also go into that section and you can upvote questions that you like. So be sure, if you can, to kind of look and make sure that the question you want to ask hasn't already been asked. And if it has been, just vote for it. Because I know there are 400 people almost registered for this tonight. So we want to make sure to get it to as many questions as possible. So if you see one that's very similar to what you want to ask, just upvote that. And we'll be sure to get to as many as we can. So I'm going to get out of the way and welcome our friend Clark Moore to take it away. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, ER. What a pleasant introduction. Hi, Becky.
Hi.
How are you, my love?
I'm good. I'm really glad to be here. Yeah, I'm just so grateful that I'm able to do this with you and with so many people from all over the world. Like, this is like, I didn't know what to think of these virtual events at first, but it does feel really special when you're looking at this comment feed and it's like, I'm in Germany, like I'm in Argentina, I'm in the Philippines. And that like means so much to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The accessibility of it, sort of being able to be, I'm in Los Angeles, you're in Atlanta. And like you said, all these people are around the world and they're here to celebrate you, which is really exciting. I know we were talking yesterday about some of those launch jitters. Sort of talk to us about what it's like you're an old pro at this point, but it's exciting to hear that it still makes you a little nervous, a little excited. Talk to us a little about what it feels like to be putting a book out into the world.
Yeah. Well, I should say, I guess I'm an old pro. I definitely don't feel like a pro. I don't feel like, imposter syndrome, like I could spend the rest of the night talking about it, but
I have the proof. I have it here.
But I'm also, I'm an author with an anxiety disorder too. So I like take that for what it is. Like my baseline state is like at least a little bit anxious. But yeah, I think a lot of it for me comes from the fact that this is my first solo release of any kind in, over 2 years since the Offbeat. And I was definitely nervous releasing the 2 collaborations, Yes, No, Maybe So, and What If It's Us, but, I guess there was a lot of comfort in like, you know, I'm releasing a book, like, but it's with one of my best friends and we're in it together. And like, this is like, I think this is a good baby step though. It's like, it's a little novella. Like,
yeah.
let's just get back into it. So.
And to call it a novella is also so apt because I told you I read it yesterday. You graciously sent me a copy that I was able to dive into. And it was, I mean, I truly was consumed by the stories. I mean, these characters who I know and who I love, sort of amplified by the fact that I have the physical manifestations of the actors who played these characters, who I also know and love, sort of swirling in my mind as I'm watching them go through the things that we all go through with transitions from, specifically from high school into college. And I think one of the things that really struck me, and which always sort of sits with me in reading your writing, is the way in which you're able to get into the minds so authentically of these teens. And I think there's something really interesting about the authenticity of the voice of your characters that I wonder sort of, how do you find your way to that? You know, how do you find your way into, especially, I mean, this story is, you don't have any of the benefits of exposition, you know, you sort of given yourself this difficult task of telling an entire story through these first-person interactions. And so that was one of the things that I was wondering when I was reading, was how do you get into their heads? Because also they have such distinct voices. It's not like you're writing with one, you know, mono YA voice across the characters. They're each so distinct individuals and whole individuals. And so I'm wondering, how do you get into their heads?
That's like the most flattering way to ask that question ever. Like, because it's just, you know, you never know, like, if it's working, unless it works for a reader. And obviously it's not going to work for every reader, but yeah, you know, I think, you know, one of the biggest things for me, and I think like it took me a minute to realize this myself, because, you know, one of the questions I think all YA authors will get a lot over the years is specifically, especially if you are like, you know, I wouldn't say I'm like elderly, but like, you know,
You're not.
You know, like generationally speaking, like I am like an old millennial, you know, or like an exennial. And so sometimes people ask like how do you make your voice sound like a teen? Sometimes fellow old millennials will say, you sound so much like a teen. And I'm like, I do think I nailed what an exennial thinks a teen sounds like. For
right.
Yeah, so, you know, I think for me, it's never like trying to sound like a teen. There's never a moment when I'm writing where I'm trying to like teen my voice, I guess. It's all this more like holistic character voice. So, you know, so this is Simon's voice as opposed to the voice of, you know, 16-year-old Simon or 18-year-old Simon or, you know, 19-year-old Simon. So.
Right, because that's the other piece that I was struck by, is that these characters are developing and evolving and growing through some of the most impactful periods of their lives, you know, through high school, various points of high school, and even just that transition, which you nail into freshman year. I remember having so many of these feelings of finality. You know, there's this theme that keeps coming up in the book of memory, and sort of coming back to these experiences of remember when we did this, remember when we were in high school, and remember, and sort of watching those memories become cemented. I sort of felt like those characters are seeing, you know, one of them says something about realizing that they would never be able to go back, you know, that time only moves forward, and we don't get to go relive those high school moments. We don't get to go back to the Ferris wheel or to whatever, you know, the place is that sort of like cements that memory. And I'm wondering if, I know a lot of people talk to you about your background as a psychologist, and I'm wondering if some of these fears or these issues that these characters are grappling with are pulled from or sourced from or themes that you saw in those conversations of the kids you were working with, and some of the fears or anxieties that they were struggling with?
That's such a good question. And it's, you know, it's really like complicated my relationship to kind of my former career, because and it's like bizarre to think that, you know, that was, how long ago was it, like 8 or 9 years ago or something, and I had this totally different career, and I had this completely different life. And you know, I don't always understand my process, and I don't always understand my inspiration. But as far as I can tell, I feel much more like I'm pulling from my own memories than from even vague clinical interactions. Obviously, I wouldn't touch anything from a therapy session due to
right, of course.
But like even in a very broad sense, like particularly the farther I get from being a therapist, it's just like you know, when I think about kind of my thoughts about that transitional time and memory and things like that, that's you know, that was a preoccupation for me in moving from high school to college. I would say it's always been a little bit of a preoccupation. Like I'm the kid every time, even now, every time I go to my mom's house, or like, you know, back when I engaged in the real world, you know, like when I go to my mom's house, like I 100% like would go like straight upstairs to my baby box and my like high school scrapbook and everything, and I'm just like digging through it and like mining for memories, I guess, kind of like it's and I think there is something, you know, it's really, I guess this is sparked by something about the way you just phrased that question, like kind of made something click for me. But there really is something about the act of writing these experiences down that helps you keep them in a way.
Yeah.
And that's like, I think I've talked about this in interviews maybe, but you know, before the thing I did before I wrote Simon is like, I reread all of my teen journals, and it came right back. And it's like everything that is in the journal, I like, and it's not just like reading it back to me like a story. It's like I'm there, and I remember I wrote it down, and that's, you know, that's part of being an author. And you write, and I know you, like, I'm sure like all of us kind of have some variation on kind of what the act of writing does and how that interacts with memory. But anyway, yeah, Love Creekwood, it being emails. Emails they write to each other. It's very like, it's almost like they are kind of living that process through the story.
Yes, and I think what also is so brilliant about that choice is that it really gets to this other theme of intimacy that keeps coming up, both not only the intimacy within these characters and the relationships and sort of the love that's developing, you know, between them or between each other, whether it's a romantic love or a friendship love, or a love that, for a roommate that maybe starts off a little quirky and then turns out to maybe be someone you might like a little bit. And I think what's so interesting about the choice of having it be emails is that there's almost nothing more intimate than reading the correspondence of someone else. I had this feeling when I was reading it of like, is this appropriate? Should I be reading these emails between these characters? It feels so private, and yet it's such a privilege to be let behind that curtain. I have a book that I love, which is a collection of letters between Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac. And I feel the same way, where you're reading this correspondence, anytime you discover a correspondence, and it's just like, you get so much insight into the world around these people, and also into the people themselves, sort of speaking to the ways in which a Simon email is different from a Leah email, even just the structure of where the indentations come, or like whether it's grammatically correct, like there, and it's those little details that tell you so much about the people. And I'm wondering, how did you come to this idea of sharing the story in this way?
Yeah, it's hard to remember. Love Creekwood is told only in emails for a couple of reasons. One, it felt like, just the perfect way to honor Simon in particular, and just to close out the Simonverse. The other reason, though, is I told you a little bit about this, and I've talked about this in one or two places maybe, but probably, I'm guessing most people don't know this about Love Creekwood is just promise me you won't cancel your pre-orders when I tell you this. I wrote Love Creekwood in just over 2 weeks, which is so different than any other experience. Like, I'm a slow, inconsistent kind of writer. I have never been able to do like a word count, or like hit a word count target. But Love Creekwood wasn't going to be a thing. Like, the fact that this is a book, especially like a physical book, is completely surreal. Like, if you could see the whole thing, like just the chaos behind the scenes. I don't even know, like HarperCollins, like the fact that they pulled that off is, I'm in awe. Like, so they, yeah, I wasn't going to write it. Like, every time, in January, all the way up to like January of this year, when people are like, can you write a sequel of Simon? I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I meant it. I wasn't absolutely not lying.
Yeah.
But then, it's, as we got closer to Love Victor, they're like, within HarperCollins, there started to be kind of some conversations about like, are we going to do a tie-in? Could Becky try to get the rights to do a tie-in to Love Victor? And I like shut it down pretty quickly, because I'm just like, I would like, it's unbelievable how many ways I could like mess up that story. Like, it's just, it's not, it's not like that. Just that story for me is not what the world needs. But but I also kind of, it was nerve-wracking imagining somebody else writing it.
Right.
And then there's also the fact that the process, even for getting the rights to even use those characters, is this like drawn-out legal thing that would be between like HarperCollins and and Fox and Disney and everybody. Yeah. And by the time that was settled, I think I would have had about 2 hours to write it. Like, so what I could do was use my, and it killed me that I couldn't use Ethan.
I know. Well, I know. I was going to say, because I think, sort of what's interesting about these this world, this Simonverse that you've created, is that it both exists in the minds and the hearts of these people, and in a world in which these characters are texting each other and emailing each other and hanging out with each other and going to Waffle House with each other. But then it also sort of exists within the real world, which has legal issues and contractual issues. And, you know, it's not quite as simple as you can do whatever you want. And I think, and so sort of to like anyone who is curious about Ethan's place in it, that is part of the, you know, the tricky part. But I think also, and this is sort of a question, not to derail you, but it just is a question that I've been wondering for so long. Does that feel daunting when, you know, I've sort of been thinking about how in some ways the scariest thing as a writer, or for some writers, is maybe the blank page. But I think also there's probably got to be a whole other series of fears and issues to having so much already written. And now you have to come back in and both adhere to the rules you've created, as well as the rules your lawyers and your publishers and the studio and all these other people have created. And sort of how do you balance that? How do you navigate that creatively?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. That's like, I don't know that I've ever really like unpacked that, but well, my understanding, and like, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not sure about it. But everyone in my family are lawyers, but I'm not. But, yeah, I think that I have like retained the rights to my original characters, so I don't have any film rights to them or stage rights to them. So actually, I'm going to answer this question right now because I get this question at least 5 times a day, which is like very flattering as well. But I cannot make Leah on the Offbeat a movie. I cannot make Leah on the Offbeat become a part of Love Victor. I do not own theatrical or film or television rights to any of the Simonverse, like certainly not the Creekwood characters. And yeah, so yeah, it was, and it's a little bit terrifying. Like I think the loss of control over the story is terrifying, and there's the fact that like no matter what decisions are made creatively, and I, you know, have given up the right to be in the room as those decisions are being made for most of the time. Like, right. You know, certainly with Love Victor, which is not a direct adaptation, you know, I can't control those decisions, but I'm kind of like accountable. And I'm sort of the first point of like, if somebody has a grievance, like they will fast, like, and it's like, I'm like, I am like this, I'm like a nerd with an anxiety disorder here, and I have in Hollywood. I'm here coming at you live from Roswell, Georgia, like in the suburbs. It's so it's scary, and like the thing that really, honestly, the thing that made it okay and actually made it really lovely is just Isaac and Elizabeth and Greg and the creative minds who were involved in the entire writer's room. It's like they just made such a point to take really good care of it. And so like, we just did a phenomenal job. I think like, I think it's pretty obvious that like my love for Love Simon and Love Victor is very genuine. I think they're phenomenal. I can't take credit for them. But yeah, but it was scary. Like, you know, I mean, because you don't know going into it, like how it's going to turn out. Yeah. And I do like, it is really like, when I think about like my relationship to like Ethan and Victor and like, you know, all these other little like, you know, little guys like Mia and you know, I'm just like, I 1,000,000% consider those characters like my baby. Like it's like I am like that dinosaur kangaroo Pokemon, you know, who just plucks up like Pikachu and puts him right in there. Like like
yeah, it's gonna be hard. I mean, it's gotta feel like, and it's so funny that college would be the focal point of this, of Love Creekwood, because it's gotta feel like, you know, letting go of a child or a series of children, you know, sort of, and having to allow creatively the characters that exist within the books or the world that exists within the books to operate in tandem with the world that exists in the film and in the series, but to acknowledge that while they may overlap and cross, sort of in like, my friend texted me and said, Love Victor, there's a scene where a couple of the Love Simon people come into Love Victor, and he said it was the Avengers, the gay Avengers that he crossed over that he needed, you know? And it's sort of like, I mean, we've created like a Marvel cinematic universe with these characters wherein they each get their own thing, whether it's a book or a film or a moment in a series. And they overlap sometimes, but you know, as with the Avengers, it's not all Avengers movies. Sometimes we have to see what's going on over here, what's going on over there. And so by allowing yourself to let go of some of that creative control or some of that like ability to micromanage, you make the universe so much bigger and so much brighter, and give the opportunity for people to engage with it in so many different ways. And that must feel, I mean, how does that feel? That must feel amazing.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's one of those things like to me it's like amazing that it's out there, and I just have a hard time, like, you know, like watching Love Victor, for example. I'm like, this is my favorite TV show I've ever seen, and I'm obsessed with it. I mean,
that soundtrack alone.
And it's like, wait, say that again. Hold on.
I said the soundtrack alone.
Oh, I know.
When it comes in, it's like so good.
It's so good, and it's like you know, but I don't think like emotionally, I'm not like watch like, and I even felt this with Love Simon. It's like watching it, I'm not feeling like it's coming out of my brain in particular. It's just like, you know, it's just like somebody just created the exact movie or show that I wanted to watch, you know?
Right.
And it's yeah, so it's a little bit surreal. I think that's good though. Like, I think it would just be like too much to like it I don't know, maybe it would almost feel like too intrusive for me or something to like feel like it was like playing out exactly the way it plays out like in my head as I'm writing it, or so I think of them as separate. Like the one question that just, no, many questions stump me, but one of the questions that always stumps me is people often ask, what's the thing you would change about Love Simon, or what would you change about Love Victor? And I'm like, I don't know, you know, like they're just like, they're separate entities.
Yeah.
To me, you know, like I love them. And I think I would change, only thing I'd change about Love Victor is I would make it have worldwide distribution.
Yeah.
So all of y'all could see it, because I like my heart breaks. Like I just like, yeah, I know how many people want to watch it who don't have access to it now. So it's just like, also like, if that's you, because I know there are people from all over the world watching this, just like I have not forgotten about you, and I am thinking of you, and I hope like I will continue to advocate for you behind the scenes. But yeah, hopefully they will step up soon. Hopefully.
Yeah. Oh, I hope so too. It is really special. And I mean, these new boys, I told you I ran into them at the protest.
Yeah.
I like, It was so crazy, Becky, because like, I don't even know how many tens of thousands or 100,000 people were at this Pride/Black Lives Matter protest a couple weeks ago. And I went on Instagram afterwards and saw like almost every person I know in Los Angeles, a city of nearly 18 million people, were at this march. And for some reason, I stepped over onto a corner, and who do I see? None other than Victor and Benji. And they were too far by the time I realized who they were to say anything. But also, it was the week before, it was the Sunday before Love Victor came out. And it was just this like weird universe, like passing of the torch kind of feeling, you know? Because I will say, I love the show. It's so fun and special. And it does feel a little bit like when you go back to your high school and you see the new kids on your stage. Do you know what I mean? And you're like, okay, this used to be my world. I've graduated and this is it's your thing now. It did feel a little bit like it was magical to watch these people inhabit this world that gave me so much and, you know, like opened an entire world up to me. I'm seeing all these people saying they love Benji and
yeah.
Jacket. Yeah.
Like, I know you should have felt like passing the sweater. No.
Yeah, totally. Yes, exactly. Passing the sweater. So I guess we should, one of the fun things that we always love to do, you and I, whether it's when we're having coffee in Atlanta or just when we're texting, we love to speculate on what Ethan is up to. And there's one thing in the book that I love. Our girl Taylor Metternich, you know she's my favorite. She gives you everything you want and more. Is there anything you don't want to say about Taylor? Because do we know where she goes to school already, or is that a spoiler?
Oh yeah, I don't remember actually if it's in Leon the Offbeat. I think it might be, but even if so, I don't consider it a spoiler. But I'm just like, I'm more into your phrasing where, is there anything I don't want to say about Taylor? Like, there's literally not. I would talk about Taylor forever. Like, there is nothing I want to say about her.
She's my girl, you know, and she was like, she and Ethan are such great, like, partners in crime. And I always saw them as like she was the Serena to my Blair, you know? I always sort of saw them as like frenemies where they were really close, but they were also like, both had a little bit of Slytherin in them, you know? Where they're like, get what they want, you know? And so I thought it was so perfect that, of course, Taylor goes to Harvard. Like, of course she does. Where else would she go?
Right.
And it was even more perfect because I personally feel like Ethan goes to Yale.
Yes.
And it just feels like, of course, these frenemies, best friends, would go to rival schools. And I can just see them like talking mess at the Harvard-Yale game, you know, and like dragging each other at the tailgates.
Who's going to write us this fan fiction? Who's going to do
it? I know, we need it. We need it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I know. It's like, if I could have written Ethan, first of all, we would have been on the phone. Like, the 2 weeks like it took to write that, like, this, it wouldn't have happened because we would have spent 2 weeks like speculating every detail about like nuances of like Ethan and Taylor's friendship and how it's affected by the distance and by their school rivalries, like
all that good stuff. Yeah. And I said to Isaac when I texted him after watching Love Victor, I was like, I feel like Ethan, I mean, everyone's booed up is the thing in Love Creekwood. Like, everyone's getting, whether it's above board or whether they're not letting people know about it, like everyone's getting kind of something going on. And I really feel like Ethan is, I said this to Isaac, I feel like Ethan is dating a Kennedy. He's gone off to Yale. He's like broken into that upper echelon of American royalty, you know?
Yes.
And he's like fast tracked to president.
He's like, this is where like the Love Victor universe and the politician universe could collide even.
Totally.
So we have Ethan showing up like with that future.
Yes.
Love Victor. But guys, I know nothing about
this
season
is full speculation.
Season 2, just to make that very clear. But like but then we have you do a cameo on the politician, which, just to be very clear, I am a fan of the politician, but I have no involvement in the production. I do not know them. I do not have any influence. with
I know,
that.
we're getting the kids too excited.
I know. I do. I feel like I just like see the games of telephone that happen sometimes where it's like with when Love Victor was announced in the first place.
Yeah.
Like it was like months and months of people who just like would not let it die that it was going to be a Leah on the Offbeat adaptation. Because,
right. Yes. Oh, I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, because like the Hollywood sources like leaked misinformation.
Yeah.
I had people explaining to me that like, no, they actually read it in a reputable source and it is going to be Leah on the Offbeat. I'm like, I wrote Leah on the Offbeat.
You're like, I would know.
It's not.
Yeah. Wow. Oh yeah, and Miss Albright. Oh, I mean, Natasha just kills it in
yes.
in the opening of the series. She's so good. Okay, so I'm looking through these questions, and a lot of them are about stuff we've already talked about. I think.
Oh my gosh! No! I'm seeing in the comments. Wait, so there's going to be a movie of Leah. No.
Everybody wants to know that.
No, what I'm saying is the entertainment media reported that there was going to be, but there wasn't. It was always going to be Love Victor. They did not change it. They just leaked the wrong information. There is, as far as I know, I personally do not know of any plans to make any kind of adaptation of Leah on the Offbeat. I cannot make it happen. I cannot make them do it. And as far as I know, it's not happening. So just to be totally clear.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so one question that I have for you, which I think actually touches on a couple of these in a couple of different ways. We've talked about the separation between the series and the books. And I don't know if it's even clear, having watched Love Victor, where the series suggests Simon goes to school. I know that it suggests that Simon has a relationship with New York, but I don't know that it's exactly clear what that relationship is. And the reason I ask that is because a lot of people want to know sort of the storyline of Love Creekwood, sort of how Bram and Simon's relationship is developing. I'm asking this very, very carefully because I don't want to give away anything that you don't want to tell. And obviously, like, their relationship is the primary conflict or sort of like driving narrative of the book, which is so, I mean, it's just so brilliant the way you did that. But I'm sort of curious, like, first of all, whatever you want to say about setting up Love Creekwood for people who haven't read it yet. And then two, sort of like talking about how you chose to develop the relationship in that way. I think sort of I'm coming at it from two sides. One being that there's the creative side of me as a writer that says the story reveals itself to you, sort of that anecdote of Michelangelo's David, where the David was always in the marble. He just had to cut away the parts that weren't the David. And Ta-Nehisi Coates says that about his book, The Water Dancer. I think a lot of people sort of feel like they're just the conduit for the story that was already existing in the other universe. They're just bringing it into this one. But then I think there's this other side of being a writer, which is logistically like setting up conflict, or, what makes the story interesting is having a character that wants something and them not being able to have that thing, and sort of watching the ways in which they react to that, or sort of, so yeah, I'm coming at it from those two perspectives, but just sort of like anything you want to say about their relationship, Simon and Bram, and especially as it sets up the of Love Creekwood.
Yeah, that's like this question, and I feel like, oh, I have like the super interesting answer in my head, but I'm going to hold back a little bit.
Okay.
I personally love this question, and I think I'll probably circle back to it too in a couple of weeks when it's like maybe in a space where I'm, you know, doing an event for people who have read it.
Yeah, yeah, a book club.
Yeah, yeah, in terms of the setup, and for me, like, I think it feels like it's a combination where some things are very intentional and some things just sort of like show up in the text, or just,
yeah,
they just kind of happen organically in some way. But in the case of Love Creekwood, you know, I was planning to write it, and I knew going into it that if you have read Leon the Offbeat, and if you have seen Love, Simon, you know that there are just a couple of points where the two canons diverge. And, you know, one of those points, for example, happens to be where Simon, well, also Simon's a senior in high school in both stories, you know, but I think, you know, and I want to say in Love, Simon, he thinks he's going to school in LA. They, you know, have him in New York in Love, Victor. And in Leon the Offbeat, Simon goes to a little school in outside of Philadelphia called Haverford, which is like one of my favorite. It's yeah. So I had people be like, "How do you know about Haverford? Like, what's your relationship to Haverford?" You talk all the time about how you went to Wesleyan, which is a different school. Like,
yes,
and then I went to Wesleyan. But yeah, so my sister went to Haverford, so it's
okay.
And I'm very close with my sister, so that's the school where I, you know, if there's one school, a college that I spent the most time at that's not Wesleyan, it would be Haverford.
Right.
So and that's where in my canon, that's where. Oh my gosh! Somebody just said, "Go Squirrels!"
Is that their mascot?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but yeah. Well, and it was just like, it was really important to me to be consistent with my canon, because not just the like logistical details like that, but there's just like a lot of you know, like, they left off, all of these characters left off emotionally at a certain point. And that's what I wanted to pick back up again, you know, and that's a very different story than the end of Love, Simon. It is different by design. I don't think it's a bad thing to be different. Like that excites me. But yeah, and so that was sort of something I decided at the beginning. And I you know, had looped in Isaac Aptaker and Elizabeth Berger, who are the showrunners and like head writers of Love, Victor, and they also wrote Love, Simon. And they were totally enthusiastic about the idea of Love Creekwood. They loved that it was going to be like for Trevor Project. And I was very like, you know, I wanted to make sure that I told them all the points where it's just like, okay, here's where it would diverge from your canon. And I just want to make sure that like you're comfortable with that. And they were perfectly comfortable with that. But also one thing that I hadn't realized about Love, Victor, because I hadn't seen it yet, I had assumed that Love, Victor took place when Simon and Bram were freshmen in college.
Right.
And Isaac Aptaker wrote back and he's like, actually, they're sophomores. And I'm like, I can work with that. Like,
okay.
So it is not canon technically with Love, Simon and Love, Victor, but it's not canon.
Sure.
It's not completely divorced from
Okay.
From that canon. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good way to set it up too. Yeah. Wow. And I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, though, Becky, where you're having to hold all of these things in your brain at once, and sort of like you're having to weigh these various forces, knowing that people are coming to, you know, they're the people who have the relationships with the books that predate the film and the series. They're the people who've come to the book as a result of the film and now the series. And so everyone has their intimate relationship with these characters, but those relationships might be different because they're built differently. And so, I mean, I have to assume you're sort of writing, as you said, to the story as it should be told. But are you thinking about, you know, are you thinking about the things of like, how do I placate, or how do I acknowledge, or how do I sort of represent as many different versions of your relationships to these characters as possible? Or are you trying to just tell the story as it comes to you, you know, somewhere in between? Like is that a balance you even?
That's a brilliant question. Like, I know exactly what you mean. You know, I'm not, I don't know. I'm not sitting there like consciously trying to like placate anybody who, you know, it's just sort of like, I just have to hope that like anybody who comes in to love Creekwood, like if they haven't read my other books, they are kind of accepting that there might be a moment of confusion and they might have to go on Wikipedia or something, like, or ask somebody something. But like, I think it's kind of reasonable to kind of expect like the book to kind of track with the book. So I feel comfortable with that. But, yeah, but you know, there are a couple of references to, I guess there's some Love Simon kind of Easter eggs, I guess I would say. There's one really big one, like really big Love Simon Easter egg. And it wasn't so much to like kind of satisfy people who are fans of the movie, but it's like, you know, I'm a fan of the movie. Like, I put in a reference to What If It's Us in there, which is another one of my the one I wrote with Silvera. Like, it's like the amount of extraness and Easter eggs like that I put into Love Creekwood. I was like, I'm gonna do whatever I want with this. Like,
yes.
And HarperCollins did not have time to check me on it. So,
I love it. Well, so you brought up What If It's Us, which I think is really great. I also love Adam, our mutual friend there. A couple of people have been asking about a sequel to What If It's Us. And one of the things that I'm interested along the lines of that question is also sort of a broader question, which is, having created such a rich universe around Simon, do you have the interest in creating other universes? Is that something that you know, so using What If It's Us as a jumping off point, is this something that you could apply to other books or other characters? And, you know, I think some people are also interested in if any of those universes overlap or could overlap. Sort of like zooming out macro, how far, how big are you willing to go? How is that interesting to you? You know, are you thinking about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, let's see. Well, there are a couple of things. Like you know, in terms of projects, and it's sort of complicated, like what I can like talk about and not talk about. But yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. That's exciting. I said, that's exciting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the people who want to know if What If It's Us is going to be a sequel, like, or is going to have a sequel, like, that's a thing that I am not allowed to talk about. But Adam Silvera can't keep a secret, so you should probably just check like his social media. Good retweet that somebody made without us knowing. So, yeah. So, but I'm not allowed to talk about it, so I didn't. And I did not at all. My next book is going to come out in April of next year, and it's called Kate in Waiting. And it is a like YA contemporary, but it is not part of the Simonverse. And it's like, I think it's probably I think it's similar to the Simonverse. Like I think it's very much in the spirit of the Simonverse, but yeah, it's but you know, the Simonverse, like Simon and Leah are set in Sandy Springs, Georgia, where I grew up, which I called Shady Creek. Kate in Waiting is totally different. That's set 20 minutes out, like further away in Roswell now, as opposed to Milton, Georgia, where Arthur is from, which is like, you know, 15 minutes away from Roswell.
Yeah. These are all the kids who are like
settings.
They're orbiting each other totally.
Yeah, and Yes, and Maybe So is set in Sandy Springs, but it's different because I call it Sandy Springs in that one. So, so
yeah. I mean, you're so incredibly prolific, Becky, and I don't know how you do it. I mean, I think a lot of the questions that are coming up are also about like process or writing in general. And one of the things that when sort of like in college, when I first started writing or like seriously considering having writing be part of my career, one of the big concerns that I kept coming up against was like, what if I run out of stories? You know, sort of like before I've written anything, I'm worrying like, what if I only have one story to tell? And I think what I found was that it was the opposite. It wasn't like draining a tap. It was more like opening a floodgate and sort of like all these other stories and ideas. And what about this? Oh, what about that? What about this? And sort of like my Google Doc drive is full of treatments for films and television shows and books and things that like maybe one day I'll write. And so I wonder though, like for someone who not only has had so many ideas and written so many stories, but has seen so many of them to fruition, which is arguably the most difficult part of the process, sort of finishing it and then getting that finished product to people. What is your relationship now with your writing, especially considering the fact, as you said earlier, that it wasn't maybe the first career idea or the first sort of like, maybe it was always obvious that you would become a writer and sort of you explored other things first, but you know, sort of how has your relationship with your craft and with your art evolved as you've really pumped out these fantastic stories for
that's like such a good question. It's so funny hearing like you talk about like that fear you had and it turned out to be the total opposite, but kind of your fear looks a lot like my process. Like you know, like it's hard now. It's like kind of hard to say how many books I have out because like,
right.
I don't know. Yeah. Like Yes, and Maybe So is like mine and Aisha's as well. It was for us, our 5th book. But yeah, so 5.5, I guess. Like, I don't know. I every single time like am convinced as I'm writing it, I'm positive it's the last idea I'll ever have. I'm not, and I know so many writers who have the opposite problem where they have so many ideas that it's hard to know which one to prioritize. Like I have so many conversations, like Jennifer Dugan, who wrote Verona Comics and Hot Dog Girl and stuff. Like she and I have these conversations and like we're fascinated by each other's processes because, and I think partially because she and I are very similar, but we have such like that aspect of it is so different for us because like she gets these like bursts of inspiration and like projects she's excited to explore, and I feel like I'm like it's like stumbling around in the dark. It's just like I don't know, like I'm like I know I want them to kiss. I don't know who I'm writing about yet. It's like panic when I'm trying to think like you know, like, but I feel like so far I've been able to sort of like pull something together just as I'm supposed to dive into it. And then it kind of evolves a lot as I'm working on it. But yeah, I'm like, the best advice I have for like coming up with book ideas is to co-write with Adam Silvera or Aisha Saeed, who are both phenomenal at it. Like,
right.
they're just,
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And
oh, sorry. Say that last part one more time.
Co-write with people who are better than you. And
yes. Yeah, and I think so. There's a lot of questions about writing too that I want to ask, because I can see that there are tons of people who either are writers themselves here or who may be considering writing at some point. And this is a really good one. Any advice that you have for just sort of like a general, for writers or future writers who want to write a book but feel daunted by it? This is from Justin Scarelli.
Yeah, Justin, I'm right there with you still. It's like, and it's one of those things that like I thought would become less scary by now, but it continues to be scary every time. It's like I'm scared of each individual book almost. But yeah, I think well, the first very practical advice that I always give, which I feel like I've been like throwing this advice out at like live events and stuff like on tour. But I don't know if I've like had the opportunity to do it in like a broader live event with people who are not geographically near me. Fan fiction, writing fan fiction. I cannot tell you how many published authors I know who started out writing just exploring some existing world and like basically working on skills in that space, practicing voice, having a target to work toward with voice. And, for me, that was the single most helpful thing. And it's like, on one hand, it sounds like a little bit ridiculous and surprising when I tell people the first time I ever tried to write a novel was Simon. That was my first attempt. However, there were a lot of words written before Simon, today I am more embarrassed than ever about the fandom that I wrote them for. The author does not deserve my just like pressing pause for a minute and just like sending so much love to anybody here who is trans or like just anybody who just feels this like J.K. Rowling stuff so viscerally, because like I say like I am somebody like for my whole life I've been like, my first relationship was with Harry Potter, like my longest relationship. So it was very, I taught a class on Harry Potter in college. Like I was there at midnight for every book release and movie,
Yeah.
I'm disgusted. Like I'm just, it's like, I don't know. Yeah, it's y'all deserve better.
Yeah, it's so disappointing too, because it's sort of like, I think so much of this moment for me is about listening, and it's about hearing, whether it's conversations about race or gender, expression, identity, presentation, or sexuality, or sort of any of the, or even just sort of like immune system and health, like acknowledging that your experience is not the only experience. And that, I love people saying this on Instagram, your world is not the world. And of course, you're entitled to your experience and entitled to sort of share your vantage point. But it's so hard to watch J.K. Rowling, especially double down, triple down, quadruple down. And it's like, we should be listening and we should be hearing, you know, when someone tells you that you've hurt them, don't tell them that they're wrong. You know, like if someone punches you in the face and you're like, hey, you, even on accident, you elbowed me in the face. It's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry that I elbowed you in the face. Like, listen, hear that, as opposed to feeling the attack, which I totally understand why people feel defensive, you know, especially when their viewpoint is being attacked. But yeah, Harry Potter is so, even in sort of like the references in this world, and we've already brought it up once or twice organically talking here, it's such a part of our world. And to lose that is so sad. But yeah, I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you, because I think also so frequently trans people are erased from the conversation in general. And we just can't do that. It's, you know, trans people, trans women of color especially are being killed. Trans people of color are being killed every day. And so we can't erase them from the conversation. We should be including them.
Yeah, no, completely agree.
So I have another question about process, a little bit of a gear shift, but this person, Courtney, asks, or she says, I'm working on a revision of my first YA novel. Do you have any revision tips? And are you a writer of mini drafts?
First of all, Courtney, congratulations, because you've done like the hardest thing, which is finishing a book. Like that's a thing that took me 30 years, you know, like, I mean, like not 30 years for, it was like 30 years of like chapter one, you know, and new chapter one, and new, like, so first and foremost, like give yourself so much credit. And like, I don't know even how you can celebrate in a quarantine world, but, you know, I hope you can like, just like bask in it for a minute. So for revision, yeah, I wish I had a more structured process. And I know other authors probably are going to have advice that's, you know, just much more useful to like take and directly apply. For me, like I want to just be like, don't do what I do, which is like compulsively edit and re-edit and rework every single sentence. I can't not do it. It's like the one thing every single book I've written has in common is like, I will sit there and just, yeah, I will rewrite the same sentence and then I'll like go back through it and I will like rewrite it. And it is not the best use of my time, because a lot of times when I am going back in revisions and I'm making large like developmental edits and big changes, that sentence that I wrote like 50 times is gone, you know, like it's not even there. But it just seems to be like a thing that I have to do, at least for now. And for that reason, it's hard for me to identify like how many drafts I've written, because there's like a little bit of like fluidity to like what's a first draft and what's this, you know, like some lines in the book are like my 500th draft, and some are, you know, like the Drunk Simon stuff in the Simonverses, you were reading my first draft for most of that, like, you know, like this. So actually true for the Drunk Simon and Love Creekwood as well.
Okay.
That is my most natural voice. Filtered. I would say what I found helpful as far as like big picture revisions, which, you know, are usually kind of the first round or two or three. It depends, you know, depends on your process. And also if you are working with an editor at any given point in the process, like that editor will have like suggestions for you to incorporate.
Right.
I think it's helpful to take a little bit of time away from it for a second to look at it with fresh eyes, if you can. You're working in a really tight time frame, but as much time as you can take away from it realistically. I would also like I think it's helpful sometimes to like write down the specific things that you want to change. Because I guess for me, like I think what's so overwhelming, this may be like an ADHD thing, which I have ADHD, like, so this may not apply to everybody, but it's the idea that like it's hard for me to focus on this change because I also need to like hold on to all these other changes that are on my docket. So for me, it's helpful to kind of like put it in list form so then I don't have to worry about it. And then I can just go to the next one when I'm done and force myself to focus on one. But people have different methods. Like definitely don't like take that as like how to revise, you know?
Mm-hmm. And your relationship, you mentioned your relationship with your editor. Oh, sorry. Were you going to say more?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I was curious to know, like, do you have a particular process that you use? And is it different depending on like what, like if you are writing a script or screenplay versus?
Well, yes. I mean, I think for me, and this is sort of what I was going to ask about your relationship with your editor. When I go through, it sort of depends on the story for sure. There are times when, like in quarantine, for example, I've been trying to develop more of a writing practice and discipline because I want to be able to, you know, there are times where I have 3 hours. And so it's like, okay, well, you have nothing else to do for these 3 hours. Like, why don't you write for 3 hours? And you're like, and so then you sit down and you're thinking about all the things you're going to accomplish. And then somehow 3 hours goes by and not a word has come out, you know? Meanwhile, and then there will be times when I'm like drifting off to bed and it just starts like appearing in front of me. And this has been, whether it's creative writing, not, you know, nonfiction. It was the way my papers were written in college too. It was just like, they come when they come. And I sort of have to just like hang out by the faucet with a cup to catch it when it drip, drip, drip out, you know, but I don't really have
that. That's brilliant. That's like, yes, I relate to that so much. Yeah.
So I think like, I try to follow where the story is going. But specifically with regards to editing or with revising, and this is what I was going to ask you about your relationship with your editor, because once it comes out, once it's on the page and once I've done the work, I'm a genius, I'm brilliant, you know, it's the best thing that's ever been written in the history of the written word. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I send it to anyone, like immediately, it's the worst thing that's ever been written. You know, I'm ready for them to come and like trash it. But then, and this is sort of like the emotional roller coaster I go on with anything, as soon as they give me a single note, as soon as they're like, well, what about this or what about that? It goes right back to like, no, what I wrote is what I wrote, you know? Real Housewives of Atlanta. I said what I said, you know? And so I'm curious about your relationship with your editor, because that has to be such an intimate relationship, right? I mean, you have to be able to trust that person and believe that they're making it better. But then I also imagine there have to be times where you push back and you say like, no, this is what it is and this is what you're getting. And how do you know the difference between those times?
Yeah, I love my editor. So I worked with my editor the entire time I've been writing and publishing. Donna Bray of Balzer and Bray. I also love Alexander Balzer too, just so you know. I'm like, but Donna Bray is my editor, and like, she gets me, and she's receptive to like everything. She's wonderful. And like, if you don't believe me, just know that she is Angie Thomas's editor as well. Mm-hmm. So
good company.
But, yeah. So Donna, like, I just like completely trust her. And it's interesting. Like it's hard to even remember what it was like with the first revision letter, but particularly by now, and we've worked on like all of these books together. I have this certain process like that happens every time I get an edit letter, and it's to the point where it's ridiculous. It's like you could time it. Edit letter comes in, I read it, and I feel like I simultaneously feel like utter trash, the worst author who's ever just like I effed up this in literally every way.
They ruined the universe.
Yeah, and it's like, and also they keep in mind like Donna's letters are so sweet too. Like they're not like they're not scathing like at all. They're just very like nuanced, and like she doesn't like hold back, which she shouldn't. She's my editor, you know. She's not like my grandma, who actually my grandma also doesn't hold back. She should. But yeah, so like, so I like had that reaction, like I'm garbage. Reaction. I was saying that's my default state.
Yeah.
But there definitely is the like thread of you know, just sort of ego, like that, you know, where I'm just like, excuse me, like, you know, like I don't think you understand, like, how do you not understand like what this is saying here in this part of the, like, and so for 7 minutes, it is a 7-minute process. I have just this like whirl of emotions. It's basically like those two competing, like, you know, like and like my book is also perfect though. Like
yes.
And then like clockwork, it's like, oh, she's right. Maybe she's right. And I'm actually excited about this idea, and I'm already going to how I'm going to implement it. And it may not be exactly like, you know, it might be like it's springboarding off of something she suggested. It might be exactly what she suggested, but it's like, I end up taking like almost all of her notes, but I never felt like I was capitulating.
Right. Yes.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Those 7 minutes are so rough though. Like they're so rough. Yeah.
And it's that dance of like, maybe you need to read it again. You know, like, I had a conversation where I had to stop, because the thing about the ego though, that's so tricky, especially as artists, is that you have to have that ego in order to get anything on the page. You know, you have to be somewhat narcissistic or delusional enough to think that your voice, of all the voices and the billions of people that exist, is the one that needs to be heard. You know, I feel this all the time where it's like, I deserve to have the cameras pointed at me and the 150 people behind the camera who are waiting for me to say my line, looking at me, you know, like, I deserve that. It's sort of the ego and the delusion and the narcissism that protects you from the crippling insecurity and self-consciousness and fear that comes with that same level of vulnerability, you know, sort of like opening your heart and your brain for the world to sort of like pick over. And like finding out how to balance that, that's the tricky, you know, you can't get rid of it completely. It has to be there, that ego, but you have to have like some sort of relationship with it wherein you can communicate with other people without sounding like, you know, an idiot, sounding like a really mean person. And also to talk to process another thing, because a number of people have been asking this as well. And it reminds me of some of the first conversations we were having about some of the projects that I've been working on right after the movie came out. I am a big outliner. I love to know where I'm beginning and where I'm ending, so that I can sort of like have the fun of getting from point A to point B. You know, like if it's a driving metaphor, I know I'm driving from here to the grocery store, but am I taking surface streets? Am I going this way or am I going that way? And that's sort of the creativity of the process, you know? And I use that example because the grocery store is pretty much the only place I'm going these days. And choosing my path is like my only source of freedom. But I remember when I was talking about some of the stuff that I've been writing with you, you sent me a lot of the early sort of like ruminations of what eventually became Simon, sort of like scraps or outlines or, you know, it was like the digital version of a bunch of pieces of ripped up paper, you know, of like this thing here. And I sort of watched the way in which those pieces of paper came together to make this full picture. But yeah, I think some people are really interested in your process there as well. Sort of like how much of when you're going into, I mean, obviously Simon being your first project, it's maybe different, but in beginning the story of a new book, a new group of kids, a new relationship, how much are you thinking about the structure of it? I mean, for me, like my outlines go as far as like, I even outline the scenes. It's not even just like, this is where the movie or script begins and this is where it ends. It's like, this is where this scene begins and this is where this scene ends. And sort of like, so it's the macro outlining and then the micro for me. What is it like for you?
Yeah, that's well, a couple things. First of all, I just want to like, I want to backtrack a minute because I don't want to forget to say this. I just want to say that like Clark actually, like all of these things that you think are like, you know, the necessary like ego that you need to just to protect yourself, like I'm going to actually like cut through that bullshit a little bit and offer as a counterpoint, having read your writing, consider that you might actually be phenomenal and favorite writers. So
thank you.
Yeah, that needed to be said. I just like, yeah, you can't be like, you can't be self-deprecating with me because I know better because I've read your work. So, I also forgot that I sent you like my early stuff. I like made myself forget that because I wouldn't be able to look at that if I had remembered that.
You're welcome.
It's been different for every book. The collaborations have been like such a dream for many reasons, but one of them is just like the structure is they are a lot more structured in a way that like feels really good. And like we've had you know, me, like Aisha and me and Adam and me, like we would sit down and develop the story kind of beat by beat and then kind of a little more detailed. And then I would do, and I do for my more recent books, I have done something that sounds similar to what you're describing, kind of the scene thing. I've been enjoying doing this for my last couple of books and even for Kate and Waiting, which is a, you know, a solo project, but it's what I've been calling my screenplay, which is like before I'm about to write a chapter, it's just the like dialogue and a little bit of like stage direction almost, and then I like go through and build the narrative from there. It's probably what most people who don't compulsively edit everything consider their first draft.
Right.
It's like my pre-write. I don't know, but like by calling it something else, I'm like able to be free and do that. That's been very, very helpful for me.
Right.
Yeah, harder for me is getting the macro structure in place and kind of creating the big picture from which to like pull the little like scenes that I can then screenplay out. So. And
you're sort of like going through, I mean, are you staying really true to those outlines? Are you sort of like coming back and forth of like, if the project decides to go all the way left, then, you know, screw the outline and we go that direction? Or are you like hyper aware of these like twists and turns that you're, because I think that's the other thing about, you know, telling any narrative story is that I'm sort of, you're both the viewer and the storyteller at the same time, you know? And so like, there are times when the story even surprises you, which is exciting, but part of telling a captivating story is also knowing where those things are going to come and how to plant them and how to hint at them, you know? So it's like, it's kind of the two things at once. How much are you, how like closely are you staying to those early ideas or those early outlines?
I would say I'm likely to veer off. Like if, you know, the characters want to take the wheel.
Right.
Like I usually trust them. I think that's a fancy way of saying like I have ADHD. Like, I don't know that I'm like that capable of like sticking rigidly to an outline and like in a very organized way.
Yeah.
I don't have the executive functioning for it. But yeah, I think I have gotten to be a little bit like better at writing the kind of outline that works for me, that gives me enough like wiggle room, I guess. You know, so for example, when I say like I write my like little screenplays, like I am not trying to do that at the beginning of the process. I will write it right before I write the chapter and stuff, which seems obvious, but it like wasn't for me at the beginning. So it's just more like knowing my writer self better and kind of finding a person. So.
And I'm sure that that evolves, and the, you know, as you're getting to know yourself, you're writing your you know your process better. I imagine you see what works and you see what doesn't, and you kind of go more in the direction of what works,
and then find out that like it totally doesn't work anymore.
Right. Yeah. Well, we have a couple minutes left, and there's one sort of a quick. Oh, this one just popped up in my, I mean, it was always here, but I'm just now seeing it. What books did you love as a teen? Annalie Hampton has asked this.
Yeah, so as a teen, well, you know, there was the one that we talked about earlier tonight that I just can't bring myself to like shout it out as a favorite tonight. Never again. I love The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Like I felt like that book like got me in this like just really like deep dive kind of like almost exposed feeling kind of way.
Yeah.
I remember being and also I like desperately wanted Charlie to be real and to be my boyfriend. Like so that was one of the main ones. When I was a younger teen, I was like all about the babysitters. I was like super into the Babysitters Club.
And there's a series, isn't there, coming out? I think on Netflix, maybe.
Yeah, it is. Was it like July 3rd or something like that? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I know. Yeah, you were talking to someone named Simon Spear after Marianne Spear.
Right. Who are you? Which babysitter are you?
So I'm a Mallory who wants to be a Marianne. Is that
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I've like earned my way to be a Marianne, right?
Sure.
I love Mallory. I know I'm a Mallory.
Okay. I think I don't remember for sure. I saw like, I read some of them, but not all of them. I want to say I'm Chrissy. Is that one?
Yeah, Christy. Oh, yeah.
Christy.
Yeah, okay. She's like the leader. She's
Yeah. Okay. Type A. Yeah. Yeah. Were there any others, or also sort of like talking about these books, these especially when you were a teen? Are there books that you go back to for voice? You know, I think for me, when I'm writing, I always like to read, you know, sort of like in the realm of whatever I'm writing, but the people who always kind of get me to the voice I'm trying to achieve are Nora Ephron and Lena Dunham, Nancy Myers, you know, like, and so I can reread a Nora Ephron piece like 100 million times and still find new insights into like the way she expresses her voice. I'm wondering if there are YA authors, either from your childhood or that you read today, who sort of like help you get into rhythm or voice, or whose structures have maybe helped you think about your own structure differently.
That's a wonderful question. I mean, for me, kind of what comes immediately to mind is Jacqueline Moriarty, who, like, now I'm like, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. I met her for the first time in September.
Wow.
I like discovered her, I think maybe in college or something. But yeah, she's Australian, so I like met her in Australia.
Wow.
Her, like, I just like, I've never, like, I have no chill. I'm embarrassing when I meet people. Like, I was embarrassing when I met you because I like from the sing off. Like, but like, yeah, like,
you put that in the book that you signed.
Did I really? Oh my God.
Yeah, can you see that? I'm
so embarrassing. Oh my God, I did.
It's cute. It's so cute and special, and I have it forever, which is amazing.
I'm a disaster. I'm literally Simon. I don't even like, who let me go outside? Nobody lets me go outside now. I guess what I deserve. But yeah, no, Jacqueline Moriarty, like she is just like a masterclass in voice. She's like, she was the writer who, like, when I read her books for the first time, it was just this earth-shattering kind of moment where it was like, oh, like, there is a way to do this kind of conversational writing that works, and I see what she's doing here, and I see like the skill involved in this, and you know, it like, just like good writing doesn't have to be kind of like flowery prose, kind of like I always envisioned it, I guess.
Right. It doesn't all have to be Proust.
right. Which I like, you know, that's just, you know, and like what turned out to be true is like my most natural writing voice, and the voice that seems to be kind of the, like, I guess the best way to like channel kind of whatever truth and like kind of emotional truth I'm kind of trying to put into my book. Like, it is more similar to my teenage diaries and journals than to anything that I ever tried to like create as, like, I don't know, the great American novel.
Yeah.
During my chapter ones that I like wrote and abandoned.
Yeah.
So.
Well, last question, because we're coming up on our last moment, which I think is really a special one. It's for both of us. Kayla Faith says, you both are an inspiration to many. Thank you. What moment do you recall that really made you realize how you've touched so many people? I'm going to go first so that you can close us out. And I'm just going to say that I think in the immediate release, or so the weeks following the release of the film, Love, Simon, I started getting all of these really lovely and special DMs from queer people of color in the South, especially, who saw the movie. Either they snuck in or, you know, they found a way to see it. And many of whom were considering, I've said this before, but were considering self-harm or suicide. And because my character was on screen and accepted and sort of like, you know, 50 feet tall for everyone to see, and so must matter, they felt validated, and they decided to stop harming themselves or not to commit suicide, which was, I mean, so incredibly touching. So that's mine. Yours?
Yeah, I've had those kinds of interactions, and it's just like, it's unbelievable to like have that kind of moment with somebody in a signing line or something like that. It's humbling, and it's is a gift to you know, to have people willing to be that vulnerable with us. I always come back to kind of, if I had to like pinpoint one moment that just like gets me choked up every time, it's the Atlanta screening of Love, Simon.
Yes.
Yeah, which like, you remember the pep rally?
Yes.
Yeah, so they did it like, and I didn't know they were gonna do this. This is like Fox being adorable, like a Fox studio, like, you know, like being adorable. Fox went and contacted like my alma mater, like Riverwood. It was, when I went there, it's called Riverwood High School. It is the high school that Creekwood is based off of. It is no secret. It's like very thinly veiled. Like, it's like completely obvious. Anybody knows anything about that school. And so they brought in like the Riverwood cheerleading squad, everybody, like, yeah, it was just like all these like, it's just like school spirit kind of themed, which is like, I was such a school spirit, go Raiders kind of Riverwood student. So it's like real to begin with. But the most special thing about that was like, they also brought in the entire Riverwood High School, or Riverwood International Charter School now, GSA.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
They brought in the GSA. When I was in high school, you know, I graduated in 2001 and we didn't have a GSA. And by the time Love, Simon came out, we had just this like big, like thriving, beautiful, like diverse group of kids, like who were there with their like little community within Riverwood. And they were there seeing this movie that was like, you know, made for them.
Yeah, that's so special.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you, Becky, for including me in this. This conversation has been such a joy for me. You know, I'm always down to do press with you. Just like when I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be on Atlanta Public Radio with you. What a blast that was.
I love you so much.
I'm always down. And, of course, thanks to E.R. Anderson and Charis Books for hosting this. Everybody if you haven't already, buy your Love Creekwood copy. I highly endorse it for whatever that's worth. And I want to leave you with, Becky, with this one line from page 15. Bram said, in Love Creekwood, Bram says to Simon, "I really miss inhabiting your universe." And I just want to let you know that I would love to always live in your universe. It's such a privilege. And thank you for sharing it with us.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Yeah. Y'all, thank you for being here, Clark. I am so grateful. So.
I love you.
I love you.
You guys are the best. The fandom is so great. I've loved reading the chat. If you haven't gotten your copy of Love Creekwood yet, you can click that Buy Love Creekwood button down at the bottom. I'm also going to pop a button up here. All of our events are individually donor sponsored. So what that means is we just ask for a donation. We know not everybody has very much money right now, so don't stress about it. But if you do have money and you want to support our work, we greatly appreciate it. Anywhere in the world, no matter how much it is, it really does help us. Thank you so much to everyone who pre-ordered your book from Charis. As a small, independent LGBTQ feminist business, it really means a lot that you ordered it from us. It really helps us. Thank you to Becky for always really working with independent bookstores. It means a lot. And Clark, it's been such a pleasure. Our hometown friends, and
yes.
we look forward to seeing you go on to so many more films as soon as that's possible. So I'm going to leave the chat open for a little bit. You guys can keep talking to one another in the chat, and the event will immediately be available for replay on this platform. So folks who had to go to bed, or folks who are, chiming in from other parts of the world, you can immediately just watch it from the beginning. And then I'll be posting it on our YouTube channel in a few days with captions. So if anybody is deaf or hard of hearing and wasn't able to view it this way, we'll make sure that it's captioned and up there so it's more accessible. So thank you so much. Everybody be safe and well. And until next time, go love Creekwood.
Yeah.